Some parents ditch you before you're even born, others stick around but don't lift a finger, and then there are the lucky ones with loving parents. But Sora? He's got a dad who always sends him dangerous stuff from his travels. This time, he's mailed him a mummy from Egypt. Join me as we see how Sora's life turns upside down once again, thanks to his dad's gifts that are more trouble than treasure. Sora Kashiwagi is just your average guy, responsible and calm in his daily life. He runs the household himself, doing his own laundry, cooking, and all those things you need to do to live. Overall, his life is pretty chill and he's doing great. Sora lives with his sister or maybe his Aunt Keed, it's not super clear, but she's an adult who seems way less responsible than him, often not even handing in her assignments on time. One day, the mail delivers a huge package to their house, and Sora is stunned. When he checks the sender, he realizes it's from his dad, who he hasn't heard from in the last 3 months. And now he's sent this gigantic thing? His initial surprise turns to shock when he opens the package and finds a coffin inside. In disbelief, he starts reading the note his dad included. It explains that he was in Egypt and found a cute and adorable mummy. Yep, that's what's inside the coffin. His dad hopes Sora can not only take care of it but also befriend it. Sora recalls that all the gifts his dad has sent have always been terrifying, creepy dolls trying to kill him, haunted objects chasing him, and this doesn't seem any different. Sora grabs the first thing he can to defend himself from his dad's new monster, but then he's taken aback when a small, round mummy, no bigger than his hand, pops out of the coffin. It doesn't look violent at all. Still, because it's from his dad, Sora doesn't trust the mummy and decides to lock it back in the coffin. Seconds later, a liquid starts leaking from the coffin. Worried, Sora opens it only to find the mummy crying. As he wipes the tears off the floor, Sora insists he's sending the mummy back to Egypt. But in those few moments, the mummy is so polite and begs to stay and help around the house that Sora has no choice but to let it stay. The mummy tries to help with household chores but fails miserably because of its size, getting crushed by a carrot, falling into the dishwasher, and so on. Sora decides it can't help him but starts looking up information on mummies, finding nothing that resembles the one in his house. Then, his dog Pochi shows up, and Sora plays lovingly with him. The mummy realizes it wants to be treated with the same love. When Pochi starts barking at the mummy, it barks back and then climbs up Sora's body to his face. Sora realizes the mummy is too cute to send back to Egypt and decides to name it Mikan. This makes the mummy so happy it rubs against Sora's face like his dog would. For the rest of the day, Sora tries to figure out what Mikan eats, testing different foods until he discovers it likes apples and noodles. That night, he sees Pochi and Mikan sleeping together, cuddled up. The next day at school, Sora talks with his friend Tazuki and mentions that his dad has sent him another weird item from his travels. When he tells Tazuki it's a mummy, Tazuki wants to see it. When they get home, Sora finds Mikan on the table, almost lifeless. Well, it's a mummy, but still. He panics, gives it water from a bottle cap, and Mikan drinks until it's satisfied and returns to its usual state, which is still technically dead, but at least it's moving again. Tazuki tries to play with Mikan, but the mummy seems scared of him. They both agree it's good for the mummy to be cautious. After Tazuki leaves, Sora takes a bath, and Mikan joins him. When Mikan gets in the tub, it starts swimming like a fish, which surprises Sora. When he decides to take it out, Mikan is swollen and round, having absorbed most of the bathwater. Sora isn't doing well in school, and his friend Tazuki offers him some notes to copy, which he'll pick up later. However, Sora is more concerned with being with Mikan than his grades. When he gets home, he finds the mummy dehydrated again and has to give it water to keep it from drying out. He realizes that Mikan still hasn't given up on the idea of helping him with household chores. So, Sora invents an extremely tiny knife so Mikan can help with the chores. However, at one point, a piece of cucumber that Mikan was cutting falls, and Mikan tries to jump off the table to get it. Fortunately, Sora catches him just in time, saving him from falling, but in the process, Sora ends up hitting his own face. Little by little, it seems the mummy is becoming fond of him. Besides helping out and such, Mikan starts to see Sora as attractive, but don't get the wrong idea, this is cute, not romantic. Anyway, Sora spends so much time helping Mikan that he doesn't finish copying the notes Tazuki gave him. He even prefers to draw with Mikan instead of finishing the homework. That night, Tazuki arrives, but Mikan is still afraid of him. Tazuki tricks Mikan into coming closer and grabs him. He tries to remove Mikan's bandages to see what's underneath. Sora rescues Mikan and scolds Tazuki, explaining that he believes the bandages are actually Mikan's skin, so they can't take them off. Tazuki apologizes and gives Mikan some dog food since it's his favorite, and Mikan quickly forgives him. They become friends, and Tazuki feels bad for having messed with something so cute. Mikan continues to dry out when left alone, so to figure out why, Sora starts taking him to school, with the condition that Mikan behaves like a plush toy in public. However, a classmate, Motegi, notices him when he sneezes. Sora panics and tells her Mikan is a plush toy he's giving her as a gift, quickly resolving the situation by creating 3 identical plushies. But in a mix-up, Motegi accidentally takes the real Mikan, who continues pretending to be a plush toy, and leaves him in her locker during gym class. Sora and Tazuki plan to rescue him but don't know how to get into the girls' locker room. Meanwhile, Mikan is terrified and wants to return to his friends, so he escapes the locker, crawls through a hole in the wall, and ends up in the air ducts, where he's chased by a big rat. Mikan escapes outside with the rat chasing him and bumps into Sora. Tazuki catches the rat, allowing Sora to save Mikan. Mikan, crying, thanks Sora for rescuing him. Later, Sora gives Motegi one of the plushies he made, as she felt bad for losing hers. That night, Sora asks Mikan if he wants to accompany him to school again. Mikan weighs the dangers of school against how much he cares for Sora and decides to keep going to school with him because he loves him too much. Keed finally comes out of her room after 2 intense days of finishing her assignment. She sees a super cute meal prepared on the table, but when she looks closer, she gets worried, thinking her brother is so poor that he has to eat dog food and apples. Sora explains that it's food for the mummy and introduces Mikan to her for the first time. When he had previously mentioned Mikan, Keed was too busy to pay attention. When he shows her the giant coffin that the mummy came in, Keed mentions that the coffin was actually a gift for her, which explains its exaggerated size for such a tiny mummy. Sora assures her that they can talk more about Mikan when he gets back from school, but as he's about to leave, he faints. They discover he has a fever of 39 degrees, so he has to rest. Due to his flu, Sora doesn't allow Keed or Mikan into his room to avoid infecting them, so they stay alone together. Keed explains to Mikan that there's no need to be afraid since she knows a lot of species like Mikan, and they hug. Later, Keed starts cooking rice soup to help her brother get better, and seeing this makes Mikan cry because it reminds him of Sora. When Keed finally comes back to Mikan, she panics because he's dried out and doesn't want to drink water. Sora shows up just in time, and they realize that all the times Mikan dried out, it was because he cried so much from missing Sora. So, Sora decides that Mikan can stay with him even though he's sick. Keed takes care of Sora for a day but then has to leave for another urgent assignment, asking Tazuki to look after Sora for a while. When Tazuki leaves, it's just Sora and Mikan. That night, Sora's condition worsens, and Mikan wants to help. He remembers how Keed would wet a cloth and place it on Sora's forehead to cool him down. Since Mikan can't carry a wet cloth due to his size and weight, he decides to soak himself in a bowl of water and then sit on Sora's forehead. Since it seems to work, Mikan repeats this process several times throughout the night. When Sora wakes up, he feels much better, but Mikan has caught a cold. After caring for Mikan for a while, Mikan asks to go outside. Mikan starts digging in the dirt, and Pochi helps him by making a hole for him. Mikan buries himself in the hole, and Sora decides not to disturb him. But after watching him all day, Sora starts to worry and cry. He remembers a time when he tried to save a dying bird and felt horrible when he couldn't. This memory makes him think the same thing will happen with Mikan. Just when he thought he had lost Mikan forever, Mikan emerges from the hole, looking radiant and completely recovered from his cold, and is very hungry. That night, Tazuki, who had learned about Mikan's cold and knew about the bird incident, worries about how Sora might be feeling. He visits to ensure Sora isn't blaming himself for Mikan's cold. But after dinner, he sees that everything is fine and leaves relieved, seeing that his best friend and Mikan are both better. That night, Sora starts creating a kind of manual about Mikan, where he writes down everything he's learning about him. Tazuki returns home late at night after staying late at the club, when he hears footsteps behind him. Turning around, he finds a baby Oni, which looks like a chibi demon bull, essentially a Mikan but red with little horns. Thinking about how much it would grow, eventually becoming a muscular, almost human-sized bull, Tazuki decides not to take care of such a creature and keeps walking. Since the Oni continues to follow him, Tazuki tells it to go to Sora's house, giving it directions and promising to apologize to Sora later. However, when he gets home and talks with his sister, he sees the Oni trembling with cold and crying outside his bedroom window. Tazuki, still with a cold heart, closes the curtain to avoid looking at it. After helping his sister with her homework and starting on his own, Tazuki hears the Oni shivering outside his window and can no longer ignore it. So, he lets it into his room, assuring himself it's just for the night. Seeing the Oni sniffle so much, he offers it tissues. When the Oni wants to sleep in his bed, Tazuki makes it take a bath because it's extremely dirty. The Oni tries to bathe in Tazuki's cup, but when it gets in, it finds hot tea. Tazuki has to give it a cold compress to cool it down. After feeding it, they sleep in the bed together, although Tazuki is grumpy and tries to convince himself it's just for the night. The next morning, before heading to school, he throws the Oni into the yard, telling it to make its own way and not come back. That afternoon at school, Tazuki tells Sora what happened. Sora assures him that he's grown attached, even if Tazuki denies it. They then share some Mikan-shaped cookies that Motegi gave Sora for giving her the plushie. That night, upon returning home, Tazuki finds the Oni trembling with cold outside his window again and decides to let it in. The next few days repeat the pattern. Tazuki throws the Oni into the yard in the morning and lets it in at night when he sees it shivering, even as his sister sees it eating in his room and says nothing. After several more days, Tazuki's sister remarks that the Oni has been around for days and now eats at the table with them, suggesting that he should give it a name. Tazuki realizes this late and decides to let it stay. When he tells Sora this, Sora is happy and says the Oni should meet Mikan because they would get along. Sora hypothesizes that Oni was probably kicked out from the Setsubun festival that ended 2 weeks ago. Tazuki remembers how he started seeing such creatures when he met Sora as a child, who always seemed to be surrounded by them. Back then, Sora had told him that these creatures appear to humans when they need help. Tazuki then notices the cold, dirt, and scars on Oni when he first found it. At home, Oni finds the plushie Mikan and takes it in its hands. Tazuki assumes it wants to meet the mummy. The next day, they visit Sora and Mikan, and although it's tense at first, they soon start playing and become friends. Seeing that Oni will stay with him for a while, Sora convinces Tazuki to give it a name, and Tazuki ends up calling it Connie. That night, Sora suggests making sushi together, and even though Tazuki pretends to be tough and claims to hate Connie, Connie's kindness wins him over, even if he denies it. Before leaving, Tazuki gives Sora a list of rules for feeding an Oni, just in case. Back home, he sees Connie sleeping cuddled up with the Mikan plushie and realizes he can't lie to himself anymore. He wants Connie to stay. He also remembers a chibi dragon he couldn't save. A classmate plays a prank on Tazuki by leaving a toy lizard on his desk. While none of the students find it funny, Mikan seems intrigued. The classmate ends up giving a toy lizard to each of them, and Mikan enjoys playing with his, wrapping it in paper as if it were a mummy. Later, Mikan gets anxious at school, and Sora tries to hide him. After school, Sora and Tazuki discuss how it might be time for Mikan to stay at home to avoid Sora constantly worrying about him being seen. It's already been 2 months since Mikan arrived in Japan, and he should have adjusted by now. Sora asks Tazuki if he'd like to bring Connie to school, but Tazuki says Connie is too rambunctious and might get him into trouble. When Sora arrives home, he realizes they haven't done the shopping and decides to test leaving Mikan alone. He places a clock next to Mikan and tells him that he'll be back after shopping, promising to read him 2 stories if he doesn't cry while he's gone. Mikan resolves to do his best not to cry. Meanwhile, Motegi is talking to her friends about how much she hates lizards, even though she isn't afraid of other bugs. When she gets home, she finds a chibi dragon in her room. Because it's a dragon, she thinks of it as a lizard and starts running around her house, terrified it might harm her. The dragon tries to befriend her by offering his plushie, but this only scares her more, leading to her turning the house upside down to avoid the dragon, which just wants to be her friend and is dirty and seemingly abandoned. Motegi runs out of her house in panic, just as Sora is returning from the supermarket. Seeing her in distress, Sora tries to help. When Motegi mentions the lizard in her house, Sora realizes the seriousness of the situation. Sora enters her house to help and finds it in disarray. After searching for a while, he finds the dragon hiding. Once he coaxes it out, the dragon tells him that Motegi fell down the stairs and hurt her knee. Sora then tells Motegi that the dragon seems to be worried about her. Motegi realizes that when the dragon saw her crying, it also approached her with a plushie to try and calm her down. Motegi understands that the dragon has been concerned about her all along and tearfully apologizes for treating it so badly. The dragon offers her a flower it somehow found, showing that everything is okay. Motegi gets emotional, hugs the dragon, and thanks it for all it did for her. Because of this, Sora takes longer than expected to finish shopping, and Mikan starts getting anxious. Sora tells Motegi that he also has one of these chibies at home, and they head there together. When they arrive at Sora's house, Mikan gets jealous seeing the dragon, and Motegi realizes that the plushie she saw in class was actually a chibi. While the humans talk, the chibies become fast friends. Sora explains to Motegi that they must keep the existence of these creatures a secret because humans might try to exploit or capture them. He also tells her how Tazuki has one and shares the touching story of how Tazuki approached him when he saw Sora alone in kindergarten, and they've been friends ever since. At that moment, Tazuki arrives at Sora's house, and Motegi meets Connie. When Tazuki sees the dragon, he remembers the chibi dragon he couldn't save and wonders if it could be the same one. They spend the afternoon talking about their chibies, and Motegi decides to name her dragon Isao. Motegi talks with her friends about pets and almost accidentally mentions Isao, but she remembers Sora's words that she must keep the secret. Sora and Tazuki notice this, and after class, they tell her that if she wants to talk about Isao, she can talk to them. They tell her that they always eat on the rooftop and are alone there to talk about anything, so Motegi quickly joins our protagonist's group. She even promises to go to Sora's house to continue talking about Isao. That afternoon, the three of them meet at Sora's house, and Sora and Tazuki realize that Isao can fly. Of course, he's a dragon, but they are all so small that they didn't expect it. Motegi mentions that he always flies in her house and that he also knows how to write like a 5-year-old, something he learned on his own. Excited, Tazuki tries to teach him to write in the Roman alphabet, the one we use, and in no time, Isao manages to write his name perfectly, surprising everyone with his high learning capacity. Isao tries to teach Mikan to write, and in a few minutes, Mikan gives Sora a letter, written in a 5-year-old's handwriting, saying together forever. This causes Sora to have an uncontrollable attack of cuteness. Motegi comments that when Isao wrote his first letter, she reacted the same way. Later, Connie also writes a letter, but instead of something cute, he just asks what they think about his handwriting. Tazuki responds coldly, but this is the way they show affection to each other. The chibies realize that the humans appreciate their letters so much that they spend the rest of the day hiding different letters all over the house. When our protagonists realize this, they organize a treasure hunt and gather more than a dozen letters among the three of them. Later, Connie, the most rambunctious, breaks Sora's rules and pulls a mandrake out of the ground. If humans hear its cry for more than 5 seconds, they can lose their lives. Sora manages to seal its lips in time to prevent this, but the mandrake escapes, so they must chase it for the sake of everyone in the city. While chasing it, Connie and Mikan try to help but only fail and end up hurt. Isao, using his ability to fly, manages to catch the mandrake, which makes the others jealous and depressed for not being able to help. However, when Mikan sees that Connie has a cold, he helps him clean his nose and then covers him so he can sleep without being cold. As the days pass, the three humans realize that their chibies grow in maturity, although not in size, especially Isao, who seems older than the other two. Isao bathes alone, and even when Motegi sleeps and uncovers herself, he thinks she might get sick, so he gets up to cover her as many times as necessary. In the end, everyone tries to take care of their humans and ends up sleeping with them, cuddling like little kittens. A boy from school named Tachiaki falls asleep in class and has a terrifying nightmare in which black monsters with a single eye and evil tentacles trap and confine him, leaving him powerless to do anything about it. He wakes up from the dream scared, and his vision is tainted by the same black substance that the monsters are made of. As he walks down the hallways, his classmates gossip about how he hit another boy from a different class for no apparent reason. Tachiaki, weakened, bumps into Sora and collapses on him, fainting. At lunchtime, Sora arrives late to the rooftop and tells the others that he found Tachiaki walking almost in a trance, explaining that the school nurse kicked him out because he broke something, but they gave him a pillow and a blanket so he could lie down anywhere. While our protagonists are having lunch, Tachiaki is sleeping. When Motegi tries to cover him because he uncovered himself, Tachiaki wakes up from his nightmare and tries to hit her. Sora intervenes just in time to move her away. Sora notices that he injured his hand when he hit the ground and approaches him, but Tachiaki tells him to stay away. Tazuki then confronts him, and Tachiaki leaves. After school, Sora searches for Tachiaki, gives him a bandage for his wound, and asks if they can walk home together so they can talk about what happened. Tachiaki explains that his parents kicked him out because he is a sleepwalker and becomes violent while asleep, breaking things around the house. He has seen many doctors, but no one knows the cause, so now he only has many talismans at home, which don't seem to help much. Hearing this, Sora offers to visit his home, and upon seeing the large number of talismans, decides to remove them all. He then gives Tachiaki a Baku talisman, which eats nightmares, and tells him to put it under his pillow. He also gives him his phone number in case he needs any help. That night, Tachiaki wakes up in the middle of a dream and realizes that he didn't wake up from a nightmare. In the corner of his room, he sees a chibi tapir eating white vapors and believes it's eating his soul. Terrified, he calls Sora and explains the situation, begging him to come help. Sora rushes over, and upon entering, realizes that the Baku talisman he drew has come to life and has been helping him eat his nightmares all night. Sora explains that these creatures are common and introduces him to Mikan and the others. The next day, Sora tells his friends what happened, and Motegi gets excited and wants to see the Baku. However, when they go to Tachiaki's class, they find out that he has been absent. This continues for 4 days. On the 5th day, Tachiaki appears completely cheerful and radiant, and he tells them that he has been sleeping for the past 4 days to make up for all the years of sleepless nights due to nightmares. Even his classmates, who used to be afraid of him, notice that he is a changed person. Later, Tachiaki apologizes to Motegi for trying to hit her, but she assures him that she's aware of what happened and that it's no problem. They then include Tachiaki in their group and start to incorporate him into their human chibi gatherings. One day, Tachiaki thanks Sora for everything he has done for him, saying that without him, his life would still be a living hell. Motegi doesn't meet with her friends after school because she's too excited to return home and see Isao. While walking, she overhears 2 men suspiciously talking about having found a creature very similar to Connie. When she gets home, she realizes that Connie has spent the whole day with her. She decides to call her friends and meet up that afternoon. There, she tells them what she saw and mentions that her mother says Connie goes to their house every day. Tazuki knew Connie was out during the day but didn't know where, and now he's worried about leaving him alone on the streets. They then recall the idea of a chibi kindergarten, which Sora had proposed months ago, and Sora decides to find someone who can take care of the chibies while they are at school. The next day, Sora takes them to a Buddhist statue he calls Grandpa, who can indeed talk, and agrees to take care of the chibies. While they are discussing this and making introductions, a female entity appears behind Sora and takes him away before he can say anything. Tachiaki and Motegi worry and chase after him to save him, but they find him having tea with the female entity. He explains that she is the goddess of the temple and has allowed them to come in when the chibies are there. Feeling reassured, they head to school, knowing their chibies are in better care than if they were alone at home. However, during lunch, they can't stop talking about the chibies for a second, imagining what they might be doing at that moment. On the way back from school, they pass by the temple, and Sora is surprised to see Mikan looking plumper, shinier, and with what seems to be new bandages. This only means that the time spent at the temple with his friends is doing him good, and it shows in his appearance. Another day, all the chibies are playing in the temple when Muku, the Baku, knocks on the door while playing. He opens it slightly, just enough for Mikan to slip out and see a ladybug. At that moment, the goddess notices the door is open and closes it with her magic, unaware that Mikan is outside. Mikan tries to get back in desperately but hides when he hears humans nearby. It starts to rain, and a young Oni, who is around, sees Mikan looking worried and shivering. Realizing he might be lost, the Oni begins to guide him somewhere. Mikan follows but keeps looking back, thinking about his friends and his human. In the forest, Mikan sees magical creatures of all kinds and is amazed by these new beings. Eventually, he arrives at the Oni's house inside a tree, and they help each other clean up and become friends. The Oni invites Mikan to stay there until the rain stops. Noticing Mikan's sadness, the Oni realizes that he might not have been lost but wanted to get back to the temple. As soon as the rain ends, the Oni decides to accompany him back to the temple. The goddess, who had been searching for him all along, is relieved to see him there and then tells Sora what happened, including the encounter with the Oni. She then gives Mikan paper and a pencil, and he draws a picture of himself and the Oni. When found, the Oni lovingly hangs the drawing on the wall of his house. Tazuki's sister complains for the 9th time that Connie has eaten her food and asks Tazuki to do something about it. Frustrated and in his usual hostile manner, Tazuki scolds Connie, telling him that he can't behave like that and that he's not his father, so he's not willing to take care of someone who doesn't follow his rules. If Connie can't understand that, he needs to leave. While being scolded, Connie remembers all the times people laughed at him and mistreated him. Although he pretends to fall asleep during the scolding, he can't stop thinking about it. The next morning, when Tazuki wakes up, he realizes that Connie has gone. Tazuki spends the day calmly, thinking that Connie has just left earlier than usual. However, when he gets home, Connie is nowhere to be found. Even when his sister has prepared dinner, Connie doesn't come down to eat, which is very unusual. Tazuki starts to worry. Although he always kicked Connie out and never let him stay, Connie always came back, so he didn't think he would take the scolding so seriously. He spends the entire night awake, hoping Connie will return, but he doesn't. The next day, Sora asks what's wrong, and Tazuki tries to hide it, but it's too obvious as he's distracted and doing everything messily. Sora learns that Connie hasn't come back and suggests they go look for him, but Tazuki maintains his cold attitude and says it's not necessary. Later, Tachiaki and Motegi also offer to help, but he refuses and insists he has to go to the club and can't waste time on this. However, he constantly recalls when he tried to save a dragon but was chased by men who hit the dragon with a pipe. Meanwhile, at the temple, the chibies miss Connie, especially Mikan, who can't stop crying. Tazuki can't ignore his feelings anymore and decides to skip the club to search for Connie. His friends had already started looking for him. He runs into Sora, and they both see a young Oni running across the rooftops and begin to chase him. Tazuki tries to talk to the Oni, but he doesn't pay attention. Eventually, the Oni heads towards Sora, who follows him, but when Sora gets close, he realizes that the Oni was never Connie. Finally, Tazuki finds Connie, who is searching for a flower to give him, and at that moment, the rest of his friends join them and are incredibly happy to see Connie there. They all head to the temple to find their chibies and tell them that Connie has returned. The chibies reveal that they've drawn a big welcome banner for Connie. On the way home, Tazuki opens his heart to Connie and tells him that he doesn't want him to leave and that he will always take care of him and look for him if he ever leaves again. He asks Connie to be respectful and stop making his sister feel bad. Later, it is revealed that the flower Connie was looking for was not for Tazuki but for his little sister as an apology for making her feel bad. Since they both open up about their feelings, Connie has become much more polite. Sora arrives home after running some errands and finds a box on the living room table with a note from Keith saying she had to leave for an urgent job but her father sent another package. Used to this kind of thing, Sora gets ready before opening the box, which starts moving desperately. Just then, Tazuki arrives, but Sora lies to get him to leave, not wanting him around if it's something dangerous. However, Tazuki sneaks in through the patio and decides to join Sora in checking out the new gift from his father. When Sora opens the box, black smoke pours out, and a ghostly voice introduces itself as Anubis. Anubis tells Sora to stop threatening him with a stick and to tell him his name. It turns out Anubis was from an Egyptian-themed gift shop and was chosen by Sora's father because he looked like a regular decorative statue. However, Anubis can talk, though he can only move his head because the rest of his body is just a decoration. Anubis explains that Sora's father went to great lengths to find this gift, which touches Sora. Anubis then notices Mikan on Sora's shoulder and asks about him. After being told that Mikan isn't a mummy but a living creature, Anubis claims he can read the future. However, he only predicts obvious things like the weather, revealing that he's actually just a fraud. Anubis also mentions another gift from Sora's father, sand from Egypt. Expecting something dangerous due to the unusually small size of the letter, Sora puts on gloves to open the sandbag. To his slight disappointment, it turns out to be just regular sand. Sora puts the sand in a fish tank, and Mikan is thrilled to see it. He happily plays in the sand, as it reminds him of his homeland. Sora then mentions that they might visit Egypt someday. Later, Tachiaki and Motegi visit and meet Anubis, learning that he is a Tsukumagami, an inanimate object with a soul that is there to protect them. Later on, Sora gets hiccups, and Tazuki jokes that if he gets 100 hiccups, he might die, causing the chibies to panic. Mikan tries to help by using his bandages, surprising everyone because they didn't know he could remove them. The dog starts running around trying to remove the bandage, but Sora gets worried and stops him. It turns out Mikan should never remove his bandages, but he did so just to help Sora. The mummy is relieved when he finds out that the idea of dying from hiccups is just a myth. At school, a classmate shares that he found a ghost dog, showing a photo before the dog vanished. He also mentions that the area around his home has many ghosts. Although the group tries to convince him it was just a normal dog, they suspect it's a supernatural entity and decide to search for it, especially if it's injured. Sora is surprised to see Tazuki join the search, given his usual disinterest in such matters. The next day, they leave their chibies at the temple, but Mikan decides to stay with Sora because he had a nightmare the night before. So, the four humans and Mikan head to the haunted mountain. Upon reaching a fork in the path, they split into two groups to meet at a specified point later. Sora remembers it's the winter solstice and feels like he's forgetting something important, though he can't recall what. After a long search, they realize something's off. There are no sounds, and no creatures or animals are visible. When it's time to reconvene, they find that the path they were on has merged into one. Sora suddenly recalls an annual festival called the Festival of the Divine Earth, which occurs on the summer solstice and is exclusively for non-humans. This festival requires an invitation to enter, and Tazuki, who has always hated going, had completely forgotten about it. Horrible monsters appear, demanding tickets. When the group can't provide them, the monsters threaten to destroy them. However, the temple goddess had hidden some tickets, and Mikan hands them over, allowing them to pass. Tazuki, still angry from a previous argument, storms off, worsening their situation. They meet an adult Oni friend of Sora, who leads them to the dog, only to find it's actually two dogs. A fight ensues between the dogs, mirroring the earlier conflict between Sora and Tazuki. Eventually, they reconcile, and everything is smoothed over. They are then swept along by a current of supernatural beings heading to the same location. The gatekeepers let a man with a ticket enter, but later suspect he might be a collector and alert the festival organizers. While watching the dogs climb a waterfall, the collector snatches Mikan without the group noticing. The adult Oni informs them about the collector, and only then do they realize Mikan is missing. Realizing Mikan is missing, Sora is devastated, fearing he may never see him again, one of his greatest fears. Despite his friends' attempts to console him, they struggle to figure out how to find the collector. Tachiaki remembers that the temple goddess had placed a shikigami on Mikan, which can help locate him. Sora shouts with all his might, and the shikigami begins to appear in the sky, showing the location. With his friend's help, Sora climbs a steep mountain, the only way to reach Mikan before the collector escapes, as there's no time to go around. Sora confronts the collector, demanding the return of Mikan, whom he considers family. The collector mocks him, saying such creatures are only for profit. A fight ensues, but the collector, being an adult, overpowers Sora. However, the mountain entities intervene. Roots emerge from the ground, binding the collector's feet and body, and a lightning bolt strikes him, quickly incapacitating him and allowing Mikan to return to Sora. The collector is subsequently punished with 100 lashes and is burned. The forest creatures offer gifts as thanks for capturing the collector, and Sora gives some to the goddess and the Buddha statue. They all head to Sora's house. At home, as they prepare to open one of the gifts, Anubis notices that the chibies are upset because they were left out of the festival. The humans apologize for this oversight. When they open the gift box, they find an entire festival inside, allowing everyone to enjoy and making up for the previous exclusion. They play various games, with some chibies proving more adept than others, and the humans as well. Sora expresses his desire to spend every summer vacation with them indefinitely, which makes Tazuki happy. This reassures Tazuki, who had been troubled by Sora's fear of being abandoned, showing that Sora trusts in their continued companionship. And thus concludes this anime that has stirred so many emotions. If you enjoyed the series, let me know in the comments. As always, remember to subscribe to my channel and join this wonderful community. See you next time.